حسابنا بنقبر علينا
لو تغينا مسكنوا فلنا فريه لنا تطلع لنا
سلام أبرح قنك أروان تركبوا سعادات ቴለቪዥን ኤሪሳት ከመይ ቀኒኹም
مقالة فاسي أجبعي نحب فرح يفرح.
Okay, so I guess moving on. I think in terms of youth involvement with cases like these, there's a lot of like lack, and I think it's people like you that inspire us to inspire the youth, I guess now, to mobilize and to see representation of people like you in esteemed establishment and organizations. As recently you were as a part of human rights activism, you're invited to address the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, right? So your testimony was very powerful and touching. So why don't we go ahead and watch the video first?
But I know that this tiredness will never defeat us. Too much has been sacrificed for generations. So tired. Most Eritreans are. But I know that this tiredness will never defeat us. Too much has been sacrificed for generations before us. Too much is at stake for current and future generations. I constantly think about my uncle Siam, who after decades of fighting for independence and now even more decades of fighting for democracy, refuses to give up. A former prison guard testified that Siam, despite living under terrible conditions in prison, always kept repeating, "I did my duty. It is my responsibility. I don't care if I die here." May his courage, selflessness, and resilience inspire us all.
So during this meeting, I know there's a lot of strong emotions, but can you tell us how you were feeling having to represent all of us as a country during this meeting, and what the atmosphere was like when you had to confront, face to face the regime's delegations?
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that clip. I think I've spoken at the UN once before in 2019, and I remember coming there and feeling very emotional. At that time, I was mostly angry. It was a year after the peace deal. For me, the peace deal was one of the most horrendous experiences as like a diaspora Eritrean, to see how little the Eritrean people's interests were prioritized or even talked about in conversations around this historic moment. And as everyone knows, when the peace deal happened, everyone was talking about, oh, it's this amazing, there's peace now between the two countries. This means that things, either no one mentioned the situation in Eritrea, or people and institutions use it as an fake positive news, saying, oh, this means that things are going to change in the country. So I was really angry about that. And I am still very angry about that. But at the time, I was very, very angry. So I remember when I came, I felt those emotions elevated because I was in a space where these states and these institutions were represented. Like all of these people institutions I'd been very angry with were all there, including the Ethiopian government, including the Eritrean government, but also the UN, the EU, all these members, like states that had been supporting of the Eritrean government, and even worse, like the democratic states that pretends to care about democracy and human rights, but in other countries just care about their own interests. So I remember being very angry, and I think this time, 4 years later, I was very, very sad. I've been feeling, and I think as most Eritreans have been feeling, very tired, and so the theme of my speech was tiredness within our community and how tired we are of these things that are just so big, like even on their own, they're very big, but all together, it's just too much. And I think my grandmother's death last year and time ticking, and now this being my 10th year as an activist, has really put some things into perspective of how betrayed we've actually been. And I traveled a lot for work, and I was in 3 African countries last year. And all those 3 times, I was just devastated. Like anyone who's with me for any of those trips know I just always was talking about, like, I can't believe we don't even have anything close to this in our country. And the fact that I'm not asking for Eritrea to be the most developed or like rich country in the world, but just the fact that we don't have anything on the levels that any countries like have, most of the countries in the world have, who are not at war, or like North Korea, I guess. But Eritrea just doesn't really compare to any other country. And I think knowing that and seeing that and having more and more upset about that in the past year, and then coming there again to speak and feeling just like, this is, it's gone too far, and it's always gone too far from the day one. But now it's been like, it just feels people feeling very tired. So I was feeling that, and as soon as I saw the delegation, and as soon as I felt, I was giving my speech, I got, as you could see, a bit emotional at the end, which is very unusual for me. I don't think I've never really cried in public or anything like that, but I was very overwhelmed by just how disappointed and angry I was about the whole situation. I just think that what's happening in Eritrea it's important to remember that it doesn't compare to many other places in the world. And the fact that we are not getting even close to getting what we need, and the fact that we're getting so little support from other institutions and countries and people, the fact that so many people within our own community is being blinded by their love for Isaias Afwerki and living in the diaspora, not, actually experiencing any of the issues happening in the country. That for me is overwhelming. So yeah, that's what I was feeling there.
All right, Vanessa, that was very powerful. I can tell you that, I'm sure so many people are very proud of you. I'm personally very proud of you. You really represented all of us. And then also you were telling the injustice in Eritrea. And then your emotions were telling how the situations are in Eritrea. It's not easy. And I can really understand that. The weight on your shoulder because you literally representing everyone who is fighting for justice. And I'm sure that people in Eritrea will be very proud of you when they see this going through the satellite. And we always want you to keep up. I'm sure that you're going to be a good model for your Kaba and other young people and all of us as a nation and as a country as well. But in connection with this one, for the last 30 years, the regime in Eritrea is the top of the world list for the gross human rights violation against its people. However, to many fellow Eritrean surprise, I'm sure you and me, Eritrea was re-elected in late 2021 to the United Nations Human Rights Council. Why do you think that the UN allows for countries like Eritrea to sit in such important bodies while they are against every principle of such body? They were everything is against, the establishment. That one. Have you ever asked UN officials, in engagements, I'm sure you talk with all different UN officials on the side of the meeting, stuff like that. Have you ever talked to them? What do they say? And then how do you feel about it? How do you feel to see Eritrea? That's the top, human rights violator sitting on Human Rights Council. So how do you feel about it?
I think I'm not at all, and I would never want the Eritrean government to be represented in any capacity because it's a murderous mafia group. So I don't think they have any position to be anywhere like that or anywhere in general. But I think it's important to remember that the Human Rights Council is a collection of states. It's not that they were appointed to run, the Human Rights Commission, which would be a different entity, but the council are just the states moving around. So like Eritrea, we also have China being on there. We have Russia. We've had different. I think Russia actually was one of the few countries that were banned from the council, if I'm not mistaken. There have been countries that have been banned. It's not very common. So I think it's less of a political statement. I don't think it's too okay, they were chosen to represent in the human rights. I think it shows more of the flaws of the international human rights system and why are states still being represented in this way, given that kind of power? How do you create states, institutions that are better able to facilitate? But obviously, I don't think they deserve to be on any body, and let alone a human rights body. But I do think it would be interesting to kind of break down what the Human Rights Council is, how states are chosen or elected, because it's not, I don't think, a matter of someone picking Eritrea and be like, oh, you would be a good fit, but it's very political. And so, yeah, I'd say that's my opinion. Again, I don't think they should be there. I don't think many other countries should be there. But if, what would determine what country can be there and what country cannot be there as well? Because we do have democratic countries that are also perpetrating human rights crimes and they're on there as well. So I think it's an interesting conversation about these institutions and how they function.
Yeah, that, the trust, the people, they put the trust on that institution, I think weakness when you see, governments like Eritrea. Because, they can, defend, what they do, they were actually defending the human rights violation of the Russians against the Ukrainians, in that institution. So literally they were against the institution itself. But in connection with that one, you are like on that UN summit, the Human Rights Council summit in Geneva. How was the atmosphere? When I see was everybody in that meeting was against the regime's representative or against the Eritrea. The reports were against, all the regime's activists. I would say like almost every country in the meeting were like, saying, about the gross human rights violations and everything. How was the atmosphere? How was it like the feeling? Especially, like I'm sure you were like face to face with the regime's delegation. I'm sure you were seeing their face and stuff like that. How was the environment? If you can like take us behind the scene.
Yeah, sure. I think first of all, a lot of countries were supportive of the Eritrean government, and I think if you look at it was a very long meeting. Like how they do it is that if there's a country of concerns, if there's a special rapporteur or someone has been appointed to report on an issue in a country or on a thematic issue. So there's like a special rapporteur on women, for something like that, for example, or on the climate. Then we have, or on human rights defenders, then they have a meeting in the council where they discuss what that person has been investigating or the issue that's happening. And they can have emergency meetings. So for example, when the war broke out in Ukraine, they had an emergency human rights council meeting where they can make decisions. So they can vote. Should we elect a new person to do this? Or so there's like, it's a mechanism that can be used in different ways. So in this case, it was to discuss, because we have a mandate, we have someone who's been like chosen because all the states, or because of the states voting, there's a special rapporteur, an expert, you'd say, on Eritrea that does research, that presents their findings, that calls on the Eritrean government in those meetings, and outside they present at the General Assembly in New York as well. And so this meeting was to discuss the Eritrean human rights record from the past. They have, I think, 2 of these a year, usually. And so what happens is that there's a panel. So the High Commissioner for Human Rights will speak, the Special Rapporteur on Eritrea, and then they invited me as their guest. And that's why the 3 of us spoke at the panel. And then the state concerned gets to speak as well. So in this case, it was the Eritrean government that got to speak. And then after that, any states that wanted to could sign up to also give a statement. And these statements were split between states being against and speaking against their crimes, and you could hear very clearly. And then governments who were very supportive of the Eritrean government. These states were states, the classic, you can imagine which states these were, usually states with very similar structures, so other dictatorships and stuff like that. So it was kind of split. But for a long time, and as you know, there was a lot of even states who previously had been against the government were becoming a bit more warm to see how the relationship with Ethiopia would look like and how that could benefit them. So I remember when I was there the first time, I was very disappointed by a lot of the statements, even by the states that were actually against the government, because they were very opening and they were very much like, oh, we could see progress maybe happening, and we're very excited about what could happen in Eritrea, even though that's false hope. There's no such thing as progress in Eritrea under the regime that we have, and everyone knows that. But this time it was definitely back to a bit more critical of the government. And I remember many people came up afterwards, like saying, we hope we weren't disheartened by the comments, after your speech, because maybe you thought, and I was like, no, I knew what the speech could do. And I don't think it could change geopolitics or certain, like, states come there prepared with what they're going to say. It's not like in the moment, and it shows kind of what we're up against as well, to see that there are many states that support the government. Some states are against it, but also many states that they would prioritize their interest any day than to prioritize the interests of the Eritrean people. So it was kind of sad. And seeing the government that's supposed to be on our side, obviously being the perpetrator, sitting there in front of me was very angering as well.
Okay. So going back to your campaign and the nonprofit you started earlier, you mentioned new plans about a new campaign to help refugees in South Sudan. So what can you tell us about this campaign and the objectives of it?
Like many other Eritrean activists and organizations, to document what's happening in Sudan at the moment. And I think Eritrean refugees are suffering immensely wherever they are. One of the things I said in my speech was that once the government imprisoned my uncle and his colleagues, they made sure, they were like, okay, we can do whatever we want now with the people. Like, we have full power over the country because we have no people left who will speak against us. Anyone who does will get imprisoned. Any institution that could stop us have been shut down. so that they were able to create whatever reality they wanted. And they decided to create a reality where being born in Eritrea meant being destined to a life of suffering. And so I say that to say that they succeeded very well. And they have created a world where if you're born in Eritrea, you will suffer for the rest of your life. And so many people are suffering in the country, as we've discussed, but many, many are also suffering outside of the country. And I think it's a responsibility of any human rights organization to never just focus on what's happening in the country, but also at every step of the way after they leave, which is why we focus on issues happening in the country, refugee issues, and also support when they arrive in their final destinations and they're struggling to integrate, struggling to deal with their trauma and all those things. So for me and for One Day CM, that's a priority of being there at all steps of these suffering sequences that the government has created in conjunction with other governments, of course. Like the fact that they're suffering when they flee is a result of migration policies from the West, for example, which is important to highlight as well. And so one of the groups suffering are Eritrean refugees in Sudan. And there have been Eritrean refugees in Sudan for a very long time. And they've faced many different challenges from very many different groups and governments. And now with the new government after the coup in Sudan, there's a certain level of lawlessness in the country. And there have been a lot of kidnappings, essentially, of Eritrean refugees. They like Gefas, where they pick them up on the street and they take them to prisons. They treat them, in degrading ways in the prisons. And they also, more importantly, ask for money for them to be released. And so if they can't pay the money, they get stuck in the prisons. And if they can pay the money, they get released, but they don't get any kind of receipt to show that they have already paid. So many people get imprisoned again. And the amount of money they're asking for is increasing. And I just heard today that it has increased to $1,000 for one person. And this is happening in a country where, it's not, in a good position. Sudan is struggling a lot, but it's also not receiving any pressure around what's happening. So we want to at least try to raise awareness about this, to pressure the Sudanese government through their embassy here in London. It's sometimes easier to communicate with the States, through their embassy, especially if we're based here. And to raise the voices of the refugees there. They're feeling forgotten and neglected, which is very rightfully so, considering the fact that it's been happening for a long time and they're not getting the amount of attention that they deserve. And so the campaign is aiming to, of course, end this, but also to provide support and solidarity to the people who are suffering there. And in addition to that, many refugees have not been able to get their ID, so they can't work. And so they're struggling financially immensely. And the people who are doing informal work are too scared to go. I mean, even if you have informal work, if you're too scared to go out to do work because you get picked up and get kidnapped. And if you do that, you can't. If you don't have family abroad, you have no chance at paying off that the money they're asking for. So that's what the campaign is around. We're going to launch it on One Day CM this week. So follow us on social media. There's going to be a petition. There's going to be many activities happening that you can get involved with. And so, yeah, just to say that we hope to have different ways people can help. So there's always, if you're a member, you can help with the campaigns, either of these campaigns that we've mentioned, or refugee services, or raising awareness. All of these things are open to members. And the idea is that if you're an Eritrean and you don't know what you want to do, but you want to help, join us, because either we'll figure it out together, because we're always thinking about it, or there are going to be ways that you can already get involved, that and it's all completely up to you. It's not a minimum. You would never pay a fee, or there's no requirement of time or money or anything like that. It's just when you have time, you can come and you can support. Once you say you're going to do something, you have to do it, because we'll count on you. But apart from that, there's no pressure. And we have monthly members meetings the last Sunday of every month, where you can meet other members and get to know people, and also brainstorm, come up with ideas. So wait, you're muted.
You're muted.
Okay, and hopefully, this new initiative will be successful, and then we would be happy to assist in any way that we can. Promoting your campaign or anything that we should do on ERISAT. We would be very happy, because we got work together to make some tangible, effective work. So in the last 2 years, Eritrea has been involved in the Tigray war against the will of the people. Thousands of Eritreans, youth, elders have lost their lives for no reason. However, many Eritreans in diaspora supported the regime. Recently, you have posted a video on your Facebook page questioning how can you be an Eritrean and not angry, overall, the situation. So let's play that video, and then you can tell us, about, in general, what, why do you say that and stuff like that. Obviously, you are describing it clearly, but I just want you to expand a little bit, okay? So let's play the video.
And not be angry. And I'm asking it because there are so many Eritreans who are not angry. And I don't understand. There are so many diaspora-born Eritreans, so many Eritreans who came to the diaspora at a younger age. And how come there is so little anger, so little resistance from outside? Like, we all know people in the country are unable to resist the government. People get disappeared, they get killed if they try to do so. And honestly, I don't put any expectation on people who have fled the government to then lead the resistance from outside. These people have gone through hell and back, not just in Eritrea, but on their route to come to safety. And when they're here, they're dealing with their mental health, they're dealing with trying to integrate into the new society. I'm talking to the people who are born outside of the country, people like myself, who have been outside of Eritrea our whole life. And so I wonder why. Like, I genuinely don't understand why. Because the situation in our country is bad. It is so bad. And sometimes I wonder if people actually understand how bad the situation in Eritrea is. Like, I wonder if people actually think that this is normal for like an African country or like a newly independent country to be at the stage where Eritrea is today. And it is not. Like, it is not at all. There are structural problems that all newly independent countries, 30 years plus, whatever, countries face. Of course there are. There are structural ways that the West tries to keep Africa, Asia, Latin America down. There are. But the Eritrean government has gone above and beyond to make sure that those structural reasons will not be the only reason that Eritrea will be kept down. They have gone above and beyond to ensure that there are more restrictions, more oppression from themselves to make sure that Eritrea will be completely destroyed. You can ask any political scientist, you can look at any kind of like ranking or whatever. Eritrea is one of the worst countries when it comes to so many different things. Like, the Eritrea that exists today is a place where either people have already left or people are just thinking about leaving. There's no one who's just chilling there being like, oh, I would like to stay here if I could. No one wants to stay in Eritrea. That is how bad the situation is. And how can you know all of this and not be angry? Like, how can you think about everything that went into getting our independence, everyone who fought, everyone who died, just so we could get our country back, only for a few individuals to completely destroy it? My last theory is that Eritreans born in the diaspora don't view Eritreans who are born in Eritrea as the same people. They don't. They call them freshies. They don't really spend time with them. They don't really value them in the same way that they would value a random Eritrean who lives in a different country in the West. But an Eritrean who's come from Eritrea is just not someone they have any kind of connection to and therefore don't care about as much. So if you're not angry, ask yourself, why not? Why does the pain and suffering of the Eritrean people not anger me? Ask yourself that.
I mean, that is really, really powerful. And then I always wonder, I always ask that question. Not only, kids born on diaspora, but a lot of people who came from Eritrea, who has been imprisoned by the regime. Some of them, their family members are imprisoned. I don't understand why. And then this is the question that all of us were asking. But this is really, really powerful for me. And again, as I say, in the last 2 years, Eritrea was involved also in the war in Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. And so many lives has been lost. And then still people were supporting the war, just because they were like really, hate covered. So I just want you to expand on this one. I'm sure this by itself is like very powerful. You might, need to add anything, but, I just want you to see not only those who were born in diaspora, but also those people who came from Eritrea, those who are like going through hell, coming through the Sahara Desert, like through, sea, getting to Europe. And then there are still people supporting the region. So, I just wanted to, talk about those two groups.
Of course. I think I'm when I made this video, I hadn't been active for like a longer period of time. So this is my first video, like big thing that I had posted for a long time. So I wanted to make sure that it wasn't comprehensive. Like, I'm not talking about all Eritreans. For me, at that moment, I was very angry about the fact that there are many Eritreans who are born like outside of the country, like myself, who are not angry, who don't seem to care. And I just couldn't understand how that could be. I think the situation for different groups are different within the Eritrean community. We have the old generation, which I'd say is more, they, especially those, this is the older generation, like my parents' generation, who left the country during the independence war and who haven't lived in Eritrea for a very, very long time. And many are infatuated with the government, with the president specifically. So that's another group of people. For them, I wonder, do you not want better? Like, is this all you're going to expect from this person that you love? Because if he was their child, would they have settled for this low of what he's accomplished for a country? That's what I wonder for that generation. If their child came home and said, "Oh, mom, sorry, I haven't, done my homework," or like, "I'm not going to graduate from university because, I have this enemy who keeps doing this thing to me, he keeps doing all these, like, keeps stealing my homework, whatever. To what extent will you allow those excuses to justify how poorly that child is doing in life? Whatever the reason or whatever like the situation could be. And I think same thing would go to the country. Like, yes, you love this president. Yes, you think that his excuse, the situation with TPLF has been difficult for the country. But to what extent are you going to allow that to kind of destroy the country? Because if you say, yes, that's a very bad situation, which I would say what TPLF, after the war ended and how they've treated the Eritrean government, there are a lot of legitimate kind of complaints, I'd say, from the government side, and the way that they utilize the international space to isolate Eritrea completely based off their political agenda and not based off their human rights record, which people usually say. Eritreans' isolation from the international space had nothing to do with what they do at home. It had everything to do with TPLF not liking them. And I think there are very legitimate conversations to be held around that. But to what extent can you use that and as excuse for what they've done? And I think anyone who looks at it logically will say, okay, it's bad what the TPLF did, but it doesn't justify this level of oppression. Like, beyond my hand, like the oppression is up there, what they've done using this excuse. And I think that generation of Eritreans need to look at themselves and say, why can't we see that? And why are we willing to allow this government do this to people who are not us? Like, what does that say about me? Like, what does that say about us? For someone sitting in America and Sweden and Germany thinking, yeah, that's okay, they can do this to Eritrea. How much are you willing to let other people suffer for your own political interests? And I think the fact that you're willing to let people live in a country like Eritrea just to push a specific agenda or to push a specific hatred says a lot about you. And I want to add as well that we need to speak about privilege in the Eritrean community, because if we're sitting in the diaspora, that means that whoever's connected to us is doing much better than anyone who doesn't have anyone in the diaspora. So anyone sitting in Sweden, Germany, America, Canada, wherever, can't speak about the situation in Eritrea to the same level as the people in the country who have no one outside. Because the situation in Eritrea is terrible, yes, but it's worse for people who have no one on the outside. And I think there's an inherent privilege of people sitting outside of the country to be like, oh, it's bad, but it's not that bad. Yeah, because you're sending how much money back to the country for them to be able to afford the most basic necessities. You can say that they're surviving, yes, but what about people who have no one? And the same thing applies to refugees living outside of the country. They have many people who are stuck in Sudan, in other places, have no one. And that's why they're stuck there. And that's why their suffering is worse than the people who have family abroad. So for that generation, that's what I can tell them. Don't you expect more for your country, and how much are you willing to let them suffer for your own political agenda? For people like myself, I kind of said it in the message, we are privileged, we're extremely privileged because we were born outside of the country, and that chance, that like the lottery that we want, change our lives, and we would have been in a different position. Many of us wouldn't even be, because we would have been fighting government, we would have been present. And I think we need to be humble about this kind of luck, and we can't just think that we deserve this. It's because we're just lucky. It just happened to be that our parents either left the country early or had been outside of the country, for whatever reason they were outside of Eritrea. We were born here, and we're living a very, very privileged life compared to our counterparts who were born in Eritrea. And I'm not saying that to say that we had an easy life. Many people in the diaspora have faced many issues, like within their own families, within the structures of like Western countries, racism, sexism, all of these things have affected us, xenophobia, all of these things. And I think that's not to say that hasn't affected us, but anyone who has capacity, anyone who has that kind of, hasn't been crushed by the systems already, they should be using their voices, and they should remember how much their voices can mean for other people who are suffering just because they weren't born in the right space because of the Eritrean government. And that's why it makes me upset. It shouldn't be that because I was lucky to be born outside of the country, my life was amazing, and because someone was born in the country, their life was destined to be one of suffering. That's because of the Eritrean government. And I think any other country can say something similar. Like, obviously, you're more privileged if you're born outside of the country from many other countries that are doing really poorly. But the extent to which that privilege is completely like completely life-changing is different. Like a diaspora Eritrean and a person born in Eritrea, our lives are on opposite end of the spectrum. Whereas in other countries, a diaspora person is more privileged, but that doesn't mean someone else born in that country couldn't succeed and they couldn't have a decent life. Whereas in our case, you can't have a decent life if you're born in Eritrea. And I think we have to remember that. As a whole, there are a few people in the country, of course, that are, having a decent life if they have enough privilege within their political system or whatever. But as a whole, you can't have a decent life in the country. And as long as we know that as Eritrean diaspora born people, we need to do what we can to help. Like we have to, because it's on us. It's on us. And if we don't do it, then again, like my uncle always used to say, if we don't do it, who else will? And in our situation, it's genuinely, if we don't do it, I don't know who else will. Considering as well the fact that we're so many Eritreans living outside of the country who were born here. We're so many who have interesting career skill sets that could actually benefit the people, again, both in the countries and who fled. And how can we be sitting on all of this and not doing what we can? So I have that, the privileged people. And then the final people are the people who have fled. And I have very complicated kind of opinions around this. I guess there's quite a lot to say. So I don't know if you have another question or if you want me to go into people who have fled the government and might still support them, because that's something I could speak about as well.
Yeah, go ahead, speak about it. Yes.
So I'm very against any kind of discussions around sending people back to Eritrea. As an activist, I campaign against the human rights abuses in the country, which means that I don't want anyone to experience that. It has nothing to do with who you are, if I like you, if I dislike you. Human rights has nothing to do with likability. It's about you being a human being. So I would never ask someone or send someone back to Eritrea. I think it's despicable. And I think people doing that should really question why they do this and question how well they can actually separate their own likeness of someone else, how much they like someone, to how they treat them. Because at the core of human rights is about the fact that you don't deserve it. You don't have to deserve it. It's just about the fact that you're human. That's it. And I think that being said, that's just my personal value. But in addition to that, I think we need to also unpack why people support the government who have fled the government. We've said so many times, we talk about all this. I mean, this whole platform is providing an alternative perspective to Eritrea, in Tigrinya, which is reaching people across the country, people who can afford it, but people who can't afford it, or before ERISAT and other platforms were able to broadcast. We have said so many times that the Eritrean government is a propaganda machine. All they've done is talk about why the country is the way that it is. And there was a time, and there's still a time, where they deny abuses completely, but no one in the country can deny what's happening. I mean, they're living through it. But what the Eritrean government has done consistently for the past 20 plus years is blame all of their issues on external sources. They've blamed all of their issues on whether that's TPLF, on sanctions, on the international community, on neocolonialism, on all of these different, groups of people or institutions. That's what they've done. It's been a propaganda machine for more than 20 years. And that doesn't say that they're saying that none of these things are happening. I mean, these people, as you said, have been in prison themselves. They've been national service. They've experienced it themselves. It's not about knowledge necessarily. It's about the root of the problem. So I can go through something terrible here. I live in London, for example. I can cross the street and a driver can run me over. Of course, I know I was run over. I was there. It happened to me. But if they said, for example, the driver was poisoned by someone else, then I'm not going to be angry with the driver. I'm going to be angry with the person who poisoned that driver. And I think we need to remember that many of Eritreans who have fled have been brainwashed by what the Eritrean government said. They believe that the root of the issue in Eritrea is not the government, it's what they've been forced to do because of these other sources, because of TPLF, because of the international community, because of sanctions. Because of that, they were forced to create the country that exists today. It is not their fault. It is because of these external sources. I don't believe it at all, but that's someone who's lived outside of the country, who's had the privilege of going outside of a propaganda machine. And yes, maybe that's not all Eritreans. There are maybe Eritrean government, supporters who don't believe that. But I do believe there's a large group of people who have been brainwashed, who hold these thoughts. And I think it should never be in our power to punish someone who doesn't understand where the root of their oppression comes from, especially when they've been brainwashed. And we know this, and that's what we always talk about. like, how can we speak about the propaganda machine and forget about the consequence of propaganda? It means that someone has been brainwashed. That's what propaganda is. And to unpack that and to get someone to change their mind, especially after people reach a certain age or whatever, is very difficult. I mean, you know this, having conversations with someone who's convinced about something to get them to change their mind could be very difficult. So I think the group of people who do have these opinions, I'm not saying it's all of them, but I do think that this is a large reasoning behind it. So I'm never... I don't even like spend energy being angry with people like that, because for me, I think I completely understand. And it's not I'm not in any position, in any moral position to deny someone human rights because of how much I like them, how much I agree with them. That's completely against what human rights actually is as a concept. And so that's why for me, I'm very passionate about that in a different way than I am passionate about the other Eritreans who are silent or supportive.
Okay, I think that's fair. Yeah, go ahead, Yarkaba.
Okay. I just wanted to agree with you on topic of like the factions within the Eritrean diaspora community. Mm-hmm. The youth, particularly, there seems to be a lot of like uneducation and ignorance, and especially now with like the power we wield with social media and how we could utilize it, there's not much being done. And so going on to social media, in the last couple of years, the PFDJ have spent millions of dollars on social media trolls. And these trolls, they work endlessly to destroy and character assassinate people like you. So how do you deal with these PFDJ trolls, and does it affect you, your work, your activism, and your family members?
Thanks. So I think PFDJ trolls and anyone who's associated are exhausting. Like, just to make that clear, I mean, anyone who does activism experiences it to different degrees. Like, anyone who speaks on Twitter will get messages or assaults or whatever, and it's exhausting. It's upsetting because it makes you wonder how many of those people there are. And I think it makes you tired because you think, oh my God, there's so much resistance. You know, are we really the majority? I mean, we know that the PFDJ, the government, has always been the majority when it comes to the public space because of the fact that they are the government, because they have so many supporters. And you sometimes wonder, like, are we making any progress? Are we reaching people? But as I said, since 2018, it's been much more support as well. Online, people are much, I mean, with the Akan movement and people getting more open, and many people who believed, as I said, because there are many people who are now in opposition outside of the country who were around independent media, all of those things. And they believed that what was happening in Eritrea was because of TPLF. And then when TPLF was removed from power and nothing changed in Eritrea, they're like, oh, maybe the government was lying. And they started becoming more publicly against the government. And people who were just, okay, let's at least wait, you know, until the situation is resolved, until we speak out. And these are people outside of the country. So, I mean, just to say that this propaganda machine has been very effective. You know, it's the best, most censored country in the world. Of course, they're being effective as well. But yes, I think there's been much more anti-government publicly, but seeing how much like harassment there is these days, coming back from like a bit of a break and seeing how much harassment, I feel like almost more now than it was like a year ago, and how many they are. Of course, you never know how many are bots, because there's been a lot of like, you know, speculations, and I know there's research now into it more. It's tiring. That's what I would say. It's also like hurtful sometimes. They say things that are not that nice, you know, on a human level, and you learn to like disregard some of those things. But I personally only care when people say stuff about my work that I'm already worried about. Like, as a human being and as an activist, my main like worry is that I'm not doing enough. And so sometimes when people would say stuff like that, like pointing to the efficiency of my work or how much my work is actually making a difference, that would sometimes like, I'll be like, oh, but is my work not making a difference? And that would like touch an insecurity of mine that I had. But now I'm much more secure. I know what I've done. I know what I've been doing. I know what I can do. I know what I can't do. And so that doesn't really affect me. But it's anything that might be, you know, touching on an insecurity. And I think obviously people do that intentionally. But I mean, they say stuff about how I look or stuff like that, and that doesn't really affect me because their opinion holds no value within me. But when there are things that does affect you, of course. And for people who like see it as well on social media, it's also disheartening, and it's very like, it's a deterrence, because if you see that happening to someone, you're like, I don't want to be online harassed, so I'm not going to do that as well. So I think it's both tiring and deterring for like other people.
Yeah, I mean, PFDJ trolls are not easy. Not only PFDJ, but it's just we know that social media can be sometimes very cruel, you know. for you to be that vocal is just being courageous, so I think that's not easy. Of course, over time that you can get used to it, but so many people that I know, they can do so much. They can contribute to the cause. They don't come out because they were scared of the trolls. They were scared of what can come, for them, for their family. So I can tell you that it's a lot of sacrifice that we have to do, and then it always affects you. Sometimes it can really get into you because they come after you, after your family, after so many things. As you mentioned earlier, they do like the mafia stuff. So they know that how to kind of hurt people, annoy people. So, but for you, being like at the forefront for the last 10 years, it's just very courageous. Having said that, as we have been discussing, you were you have been starting activism, and then you're doing it since you are like 16 years old, while you are like in school. So what can you advise the younger generation to get involved with, and how they can balance, activism and school?
Mm-hmm. Of course, I would urge people to join One Day Seum, because it's a space created for people who want to get involved outside of Eritrea, regardless if you are diaspora born or if you fled the country, or even the generation, our parents' generation. Anyone is welcome to join. A majority of our members are like the youth generation, which is very broad. It just means, I guess, generational. It's like our generation, mine, your kabed. It's like people who, born around independence or after independence, I'd say. That's definitely like the prime, I would say the largest components of our group, but it's open to everyone. And the reason I recommend for people to join is because it's a space that's been created deliberately for people who want to help. So all we do is think about what can we do, and try to do it, try different things. We push for the things that work, and we pull back when we think something's not useful. But all we do is try. So if you want to be a part of a group like that, then you should join One Day Seum. I also urge people to start their own thing if they want to, but to remember that consistency is the most important thing. And if running your own group or your own initiative is quite tiresome, so I would definitely urge you to either start it with someone else or join an existing group outside. Either it's One Day Seum or another group that's run in a way that you like. I really always try to, someone once said, one of my members was like, "You're so good at customer feedback," because I would always I email the members regularly to talk about meetings, events, or anything that we're working on, tasks. So we send out lists of who can help with this and that, and people sign up and stuff like that. And then I always send questions. How do you think things are going? How do you like the members' meetings? Do you prefer we do this, that? So I try to make it as inclusive as possible, how we do things. It's not just run by me and a few other people, but it's truly a group project with anyone who's involved. And so if you're in a space that's dominated by a few individuals, or that conversation's not happening, then maybe think about if that's the space that you want to be a part of. Because before you join something, make sure that's actually somewhere that aligns with who you are and your values and your interests for Eritrea. So definitely join One Day Seum. I think remember what you can do and what you can't do. That's remembering that has been the reason I've been able to keep doing this work, and probably the reason I will continue to do this work forever, is knowing my limits. One of the times I had difficulties with my work was I was working for Amnesty International as their Horn of Africa campaigner for a year and a half, which meant that I covered Ethiopia and Eritrea. And working on the Ethiopian conflict was difficult because it was very difficult to know what we could and what we could not do. With a new war happening, with a completely different state, with all these institutions that have been set up specifically to combat violations in war, I was more confused about what can I do and what can't I do. And that was very stressful, extremely stressful. That was probably the most stressful aspect of my activism, time. I understand the government. I know what they do. I understand governments that are oppressing Eritrean refugees in different ways. We've studied them. We know what's possible, what's not possible. And so remembering that in our work, and remembering that when we balance things as well, because it's not going to help anyone for you to drop out of college and not get your degree to push your activism, because that means, that's not going to change anything short term. This is a long-term game. And so as long as you commit and you're consistent, that doesn't mean you have to do it constantly. It just means you have to do it consistently. And we need as many people as possible. People need to remember as well that when I call and when other people call on people to get involved, at least for me, I can only speak for myself. We're not calling for you to completely dedicate your entire life to this. Although I don't think that's a weird thing to ask for, considering how bad the situation is. I would like more people to dedicate as much time as they can. We have one of the worst crises like our country's faced. Like the mere existence of our country is at risk at this moment. So like we need, and I don't mean that from an existential, from outside. I mean that internally, like our country as we know it, our people as we know it, the kind of core of our identity as an Eritrean, like our young generation is suffering and is, I mean, who knows if they will heal. So this is like the kind of like the problems that we're dealing with. Yes, as many people as possible need to be dedicating as much time as they can. But if you can't do that, then there are many ways that you can help and support. And that's why we, as like One Day Seum, as a member, you can, if you want, just support our campaigns online. Like, retweet, sign the petition. And that's good enough as well. But of course, we want you to do more and we want you to do as much as you can. But any contribution is valuable and we need to be many. Like, we can't do this anymore with like 50 people running, like being a part of a campaign with the amount of people we have in the diaspora. So anyone needs to get involved if they can. And that's definitely something that I hope people understand, is that you don't have to dedicate your entire life to it, although that would be nice. But your mere support and contribution, just in whatever capacity you have, will be valuable to the movement.
Okay, I think I'm gonna put Yerkabil on the spot right now. So Yerkabil, what do you learn from today? From Vanessa. She started when she was 16. She's been doing it for the last 10 years. Have you learned anything today? And then just give you an opportunity, just whatever you want to say, short.
Well, you definitely are like a big inspiration. I actually didn't know about you until Saba introduced me, but I think. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of like misconnect within the youth and the diaspora and I guess involvement. And after like learning about your story, how you started at the age, I guess similar age to what I am now, 16, and you single, I guess with the support, but it was you who took the initiative to in a society where there wasn't much support or outcry for the crisis going on, you were still able to be courageous enough to go out and take initiative, and that's something I truly admire, and I think it's inspiration for a lot of other people, a lot of other youth. Once they they hear about people like you who are representing us at the UN Council now and things like that. So
thank you so much.
Good. So go ahead, Yerkabil. You have, I think you have another question. Probably maybe that's what is exciting for you, right? When you see that one, when you do the research.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So,
I heard you met with the Pope. Yeah. You seemed quite young, actually. I was looking at the pictures, and you seemed quite young. But how did you feel when meeting him? It's a chance that a lot of people don't get, but they dream about it. So take us behind the scenes of the meeting.
So I was at the Vatican to speak about refugees in Sinai and in Libya. So it was like an initiative on human trafficking that the Pope had spearheaded, and that there was like a conference around it. And we didn't know that he was actually going to come. We knew it was his kind of like initiative, but we had no idea he was going to come. But he had decided to come, and we weren't prepared for his arrival, or like us, the people, like the participants, didn't know. We hadn't had time to think about what we could do if he came. And so there was, obviously, had the opportunity to speak to him, which was a big honor. But the first thing I thought, because at the time we were running a campaign called Siem is My Brother, and that was a way to raise awareness about Siem's case. So we asked people to take a picture that said Siem is my brother, that they held up in a picture and posted online. And that was a way of raising awareness and sharing Siem's story. All of our T-shirts, all of our material had Siem is my brother, because the idea was that if you say Siem is my brother, you form that connection to him. I'm going to fight for him like he's my brother. And he is, my brother who's imprisoned, essentially, was the idea. And so when I saw the Pope, the first thing I thought was, I need to get him on the campaign. So I got a piece of paper and I asked someone to find me a pen, and we were like writing like, I am the Pope and Siem is my brother, as a part of the campaign. So as soon as I got the chance to speak to him, we didn't have much time. I just asked, well, I actually asked, do you speak English? Because I wasn't sure. And then he said yes. And then I asked, do you want to take a picture for this campaign? Can you give me like 2 minutes to explain what it is? And then he's like, of course. And I explained, it's my uncle, he's in prison, but it's also about my country. You know, it's a dictatorship, and he's one of many people who are imprisoned, and we want to raise awareness about what's happening, etc. He just said, of course, I want to help. I want to support. So we took the picture, and that was it. I actually met him again a few years after as well, but I didn't get to speak to him as much then. So this is like my most memorable meeting with him, and the picture that came out. Like, unfortunately, there's another picture when he actually takes the picture, and you can see the text if you zoom in, because the pen wasn't that great. But it meant a lot. It was a year after I started One Day Seum. I think I just turned 18, and it meant a lot because it felt like there was support, and I remember there was some information at the time. I mean, now, of course, he's very powerful, but he was quite vocal at the time. So he was very powerful. He was considered one of the most powerful people in the world after, I think, Obama and Putin or something. So knowing that there was someone of that like level of importance who was supporting the campaign that I'd started and that had been done for our people in a time where we felt so neglected, meant a lot at the time, and still looking back, it still means a lot.
Yeah, that's really very important, and it's another inspiration from you, Vanessa. I'm sure a lot of young kids, they really get inspired by stuff like this, because as your Kabel said, this is a dream that a lot of people want to have, not only young, but everybody. So almost we are done, kind of finishing up our session for today. So you know that this is going to go via satellite to Eritrea. So yeah, I want you to convey your message. Probably you can do it like in English and Tigrinya. Whatever you want to say, just say it directly to the people inside Eritrea.
I also, before I say my message, I forgot to speak out the war as well. And I will send you guys my full speech because it's like 5 minutes, and I touch on a lot of different things. And I do talk about the war, and I call it, from the Eritrean side, an illegal war effort. I think it's really important to go over when a country can go to war and when a country cannot go to war. There are actually international rules and regulations and laws around these things. It's not like the president can just decide. And even if there is a threat to Eritrea, if there's a threat from outside, external threat, internal threat, a government can't just do whatever they want to respond to that threat. And I think that's important to remember. Even if you don't like the TPLF, if you think that they were posing a threat to the Eritrean country, what can the Eritrean government do legally, both internationally and domestically? Like, we don't have a constitution. So technically, they didn't break any laws because there are no laws to be broken internally. But if there were, the government have had to discuss it in parliament. They had to pass it legally. There are many steps that they would have had to take if they were to respond to this threat legally, both internationally and domestically. And I think that should be at the core of the conversations of what we talk about when we talk about the war. It's not the fact that we think that TPLF should do whatever they want to our country, or that Eritrea, we should just leave it to be destroyed by external enemies. But we know that, this decision was made by one person or a few people around him as well, and has put, unnecessarily killed, traumatized, damaged, injured many, many, many Eritreans, and it's destroyed certain aspects of like Tigrayan societies and caused a lot of pain and suffering to the people in Tigray, both Tigrayans and others, including Eritrean refugees. So we have to look at it from, like, as a country. This is not just it's not just a group of people doing whatever they want. This is a government, and a government can't just risk the lives of their own people pursue their own personal agenda. It has to be for the country, and the only way you can determine if this is actually worth it for the country is by going through these processes that they haven't gone through. So for me, what they did is unforgivable, and the effects this has had on the Eritrean people, especially the young people who had to fight, and the other people who were recruited later when they kept recruiting more people, is devastating. Because it's not just the fact that I was mentioning my life is so different as an Eritrean born in the diaspora, because I have all these opportunities, and not just opportunities. Let's take away the opportunities. Don't have to deal with the suffering that the Eritrean people go through. And on top of that, I have all of these opportunities. And now in the past few years, in addition to the national service, in addition to the suffering that they experience in the country, in addition to the refugee issues that they face when they're fleeing, they've also been forced to fight in a war. And the idea that if I had been born in Eritrea, I could have been fighting in a war, that's not the country that Eritrea was supposed to be. Eritrea was supposed to be a country where people who are young could study, thrive, and live their safe and dignified lives, and instead they're being forced to do all these different things, including fighting. So I think that's really important. And I know many people were upset when they heard that statement who were Tigrayans, because they felt that I was minimizing their pain or excusing the behavior of the Eritrean soldiers. And I think we need to learn to have more contextual conversations around this and not see things in black and white. Eritrean soldiers committed war crimes, and I worked at Amnesty International when those reports were coming out and was a part of the process of creating those reports. We used the exact same methodology for the reports we did on Tigrayan crimes from the TPLF, EPLF, from the YPF, from the PFDJ. We use the same methodology, and so I don't like for a second believe that no parties committed crimes. I think all parties committed crimes, but I think it's important to contextualize why certain things happened, and to even say they committed crimes, that doesn't take away from the fact that they were forced to be there. That doesn't take away from the fact that many of these soldiers who didn't commit crimes are also going to suffer afterwards, who are just there. So like, I think we just need to have more nuanced conversations around this to fully understand the problems that we are facing. It's not a black and white issue. And as long as we continue to see it as a black and white issue, we will never address the root of the problem, and for our countries will never heal. Because if we just look at the soldiers as evil perpetrators who just did all these things and they're terrible people, then we will never get to the root of the problem of why they're there, how they're going to heal. If many of them hopefully will face justice, then what's the best way of making them face justice? I think these conversations are going to be crucial to the development of our countries. And if we don't look at them in a contextualized and nuanced way, we're going to fail, and something else is going to happen in the future that's going to be either the same level of devastation or even worse. So just wanted to say that.
All right. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And then, as you say that, we would be happy to. We already sent that the small clip, and then we are going to send also the full speech that he made at the Human Rights Council. But again, at the end, I just want to give you the opportunity to say a few words to the people inside Eritrea. Maybe also if you want to say something to the people in diaspora, but I'm sure you already say so many things about the diaspora. So, just talk to the people inside Eritrea, directly.
Yeah, I'll do it in Tigrinya because I'm worried if I do it in English, it'll be hard to translate.
Yes, go ahead, please.
My levels. So, okay, Kajimid, I hope English kulu tadikum and is Arabko. Nasi Tigrinya Obo Iconen, what's up to Olida Abiagen, Kulu Daniel. So, Hahadigiza Kazarab Koloho, Tik Alat Kamzi. يرزكرو جنرسو مشالو سو كفتني أبغى كزارب كرداكم أنا أبغى أصلاً تولدكو يسمعني ناتي كمزي responsibility ناتي سرخيو كسرخ ناي هاجري أنا إرتراوي تيا كم زخون إرتراوي أوز تولده أوز تولده ولا أفزخون أز تولده I think كلاتنا إرتراوانينا جن إرتراوان ها different capacity responsibility علوهم أنا واتس أكفيلا كيخليا كزارب كقالس زي كله يخليا والحنتي أنا والحنتي يخونيا أرجع كفي بالكم جن يفلت يجلتي لكم جلت تاريكم كتفقمهم ولا كأسرقمهم ذخنا so I can understand له بينكم ما يكونكم I know أو كفي لكم بزوج كتجبر يخونهم جن بزوج حتسب الله أبدا جز مساهم زلوا زفتنو زلوا and I know يسمعكم أب إريتي فيريهم ولا بزوج يسمعكم سب رستيكم ولا أقدشكم يوم تيجات ماله جن أكون ما يخونن I hope كن بزخ بزوج سب كزارب كجمر more سب كزارب يجمر جن unfortunately كم ما يكون زلات كونتات هجي جن تي عندس كم نخنا كن كتسلين ناتي صراحة كابت متعرش دا أنت رأي عنك بالزلخو أنا مثلا إنه كونتاتنا إريترا كمزي بتأمي كمزي حما كونتات أب إريترا زقاتم زلها سبات كفلت أب بزوها إريتات كمزي ولا حنتي comparison يبلون so I think that I كتفلت وها إريترا كونتات normal يكونن ولا حدا واجن normal يكونن and ناتنا كمزي ناتنا responsibility of دقة كفيلنا كن كتل كن على إريترا عدنا كتملسلنا شوها كمتي زقب أزنا برات كت مع بلد كتكون طبقهم so I'm very sorry تقولي كفتني improve كقبل and I hope it's a message across the matter.
بدعمي صبوا ينيرو صبوا تقرني أخي تزاريبك بفلاي كاني أبدأ تولدوا نزعابين Slazy, thank you for your time. Your Kabel, if you want to say something, data, we'll give you the chance, and then Madam Asina.
Oh no, I didn't have much to say. It was just a pleasure to have you. I definitely learned a lot from today, and it's gonna be like a moment I look back to, because this is my first, I guess, like my first like actual like discussion with a person who's been so involved, and so thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for coming today, and we are very happy for coming. I'm sure so many people are looking for you, and then we always wish you success, and we are also looking to work with you to help on everything that you do. دقيمنا خبرات تهاتلتي سلا مسانا زمسهم شميم شم كلهم أبلات إرسات كمسكناكم يدلي كالي جيزي مس فانيسا يركابل فانيسا تجرينيا كجبرة مهانن أنا أتو زي برومشيت thank you Vanessa thank you يركابل okay bye
لو تغينا مسكنوا فلنا فريه لنا تطعنا
سلام أبرح حقن كأربان تركبوا تهاتلتي ቴለቪዥን ኤርትራት كما يكنيهم
مዓልቲ ሰፊ أجبرحي نحق فرح نزيان